The Ten Commandments are a foundational set of ethical and moral principles given by God to the Israelites through Moses on Mount Sinai. These commandments form the core of the Mosaic covenant and are found in Exodus 20 and Deuteronomy 5. The Ten Commandments reflect God's expectations for how His people should live in relation to Him and to others. Here is the full story of the giving of the Ten Commandments from Exodus 19:20. The context: Israel at Mount Sinai. After God delivered the Israelites from slavery in Egypt through the Exodus, He led them through the Red Sea and brought them to Mount Sinai in the wilderness. At Sinai, God made a covenant with the Israelites, declaring them His treasured possession, Exodus 19:5, and calling them to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation, Exodus 19:6. The people agreed to obey God, and Moses acted as the intermediary between God and the people. Preparation for God's revelation. God instructed Moses to prepare the people to receive His word. They were to purify themselves, abstain from certain activities, and consecrate themselves for 3 days. Exodus 19:10-11. On the third day, the Lord descended on Mount Sinai in fire, smoke, and thunder, and the whole mountain trembled violently. Exodus 19:16-18. The people were terrified and stood at a distance, but Moses approached the mountain to speak with God. God speaks the Ten Commandments. In Exodus 20, God Himself speaks the Ten Commandments directly to the people of Israel from the mountain. You shall have no other gods before me. This command emphasizes the exclusivity of worship. God demands absolute loyalty from His people, forbidding the worship of other gods. Exodus 20:3. You shall not make for yourself a carved image. God prohibits the making of idols or images to represent Him or any other gods. The people were not to bow down or serve them, recognizing God as the only one worthy of worship. Exodus 20:6. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. This command forbids misusing God's name in a way that is false, disrespectful, or irreverent. God's name is holy and should be treated with the utmost respect. Exodus 20:7. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. The Israelites were commanded to observe the Sabbath by resting on the seventh day of the week, following God's example in the creation story. It was a day of rest, dedicated to the Lord. Exodus 20:8-11. Honor your father and your mother. This command instructs children to respect and obey their parents, with the promise that it will lead to a long life in the land God is giving them. Exodus 20:12. You shall not murder. This command prohibits the unlawful taking of human life, emphasizing the sanctity of life, which is created in the image of God. Exodus 20:13. You shall not commit adultery. God commands faithfulness in marriage, forbidding sexual relations outside the bounds of a marital covenant. Exodus 20:14. You shall not steal. This command forbids taking what rightfully belongs to another person, emphasizing respect for others' property and rights. Exodus 20:15. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. This command prohibits lying, especially in legal contexts, where false testimony could harm others. Exodus 20:16. You shall not covet. God forbids desiring or being envious of anything that belongs to someone else, including their house, spouse, or possessions. This command addresses the internal desires that lead to sin. Exodus 20:17. The people's fear and Moses' role. After hearing God's voice and seeing the terrifying spectacle on Mount Sinai, the Israelites were afraid. They pleaded with Moses to speak to God on their behalf because they feared they would die if they continued to hear His voice directly. Exodus 20:18-19. Moses reassured them that God was testing them to instill the fear of the Lord and prevent them from sinning. Exodus 20:20. The significance of the Ten Commandments. The Ten Commandments serve as the basis for Israel's covenant relationship with God and lay the foundation for the moral and social laws that follow in the books of Exodus, Leviticus, Numbers, and Deuteronomy. They emphasize the principles of faithfulness to God, justice, respect for life, and moral integrity. The tablets of stone. Later in Exodus, it is recorded that God wrote these commandments onto stone tablets, and gave them to Moses. Exodus 31:18. These tablets were placed in the Ark of the Covenant, and represented God's enduring covenant with Israel. When Moses descended from the mountain, he found the people worshipping a golden calf and, in anger, broke the tablets. Exodus 32. However, God instructed Moses to return to the mountain, where God rewrote the commandments on new stone tablets. Exodus 34:1. The Ten Commandments legacy. The Ten Commandments have had a profound impact on religious and legal traditions throughout history. They are revered not only in Judaism but also in Christianity and are often seen as universal principles of justice and morality. They continue to be referenced in discussions about ethics, law, and human rights in both religious and secular contexts. The Ten Commandments are more than just a set of rules. They represent the heart of God's covenant with His people, guiding their relationship with Him and with one another. They are a cornerstone of biblical teaching, emphasizing the importance of worshiping God alone, living with integrity, and treating others with love and respect. Moses is a central figure in the Hebrew Bible, and is pivotal in the narrative of the Exodus and the giving of the law at Mount Sinai. His role as a leader, prophet, and mediator is crucial in shaping the identity and destiny of the Israelite people. Here's a more detailed exploration of Moses' role. Leader and deliverer. Moses was chosen by God to lead the Israelites out of slavery in Egypt. His birth was marked by danger, as Pharaoh had ordered the death of all Hebrew male infants. However, Moses was saved by being placed in a basket and found by Pharaoh's daughter. Exodus 2:1-10. Raised in the Egyptian court, he eventually fled to Midian after killing an Egyptian who was beating a Hebrew slave. Exodus 2:11-15. After years in exile, God called Moses from the burning bush. Exodus 3:1-10, commissioning him to confront Pharaoh and demand the freedom of the Israelites. Despite his initial reluctance, Moses obeyed and performed miracles to demonstrate God's power, leading to the plagues that ultimately compelled Pharaoh to release the Israelites. Mediator between God and the people. Moses serves as an intermediary between God and the Israelites. When the people fled Egypt, they encountered various challenges, including the crossing of the Red Sea and the lack of water and food in the wilderness. In each instance, Moses turned to God for guidance and support. Exodus 14:15-31. Exodus 15:20-27. At Mount Sinai, Moses went up the mountain to receive the Ten Commandments and the broader laws that would govern the Israelites' conduct. During this time, he received not only the tablets but also detailed instructions about building the tabernacle, which would serve as the dwelling place of God among His people. Exodus 25:31. Moses' role as a mediator highlights his deep relationship with God and his responsibility to communicate God's will to the people. Legislator and lawgiver. After receiving the laws from God, Moses presented them to the Israelites and emphasized their importance in maintaining their covenant relationship with God. He led the people in establishing a system of laws and regulations that governed every aspect of their lives, from moral conduct to ritual practices. Leviticus, Numbers, Deuteronomy. Moses' teachings included the importance of worshiping Yahweh exclusively, ethical treatment of one another, and social justice. His role as a lawgiver is most famously encapsulated in the book of Deuteronomy, where he reiterates the laws and reminds the people of their covenant with God as they prepare to enter the Promised Land. Prophet and spiritual leader. Moses is often referred to as a prophet, a title that underscores his role in communicating God's messages to the Israelites. He foretold future events, provided guidance, and interceded on behalf of the people. For example, after the sin of the golden calf, when the Israelites worshipped an idol in Moses' absence, Moses pleaded with God to forgive them. Exodus 32:11-14. Moses also appointed leaders and judges to assist him in governing the people, recognizing the challenges of leading such a large group. Exodus 18:13-27. His reliance on others showed humility and an understanding of the communal nature of leadership. Symbol of faith and perseverance. Moses' journey is a testament to faith and perseverance. Despite facing immense challenges, including the repeated rebellion of the Israelites, he remained committed to leading them toward the Promised Land. His frustrations are evident, but his faith in God never wavered. Even when he was not allowed to enter the Promised Land himself due to disobedience, Numbers 20:12, he continued to lead and prepare the people until the end of his life. Legacy. Moses' legacy is profound. He is celebrated as a prophet in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. His life and leadership are seen as examples of faithfulness, humility, and dedication to God's will. The laws he received and the covenant he established remain foundational to the moral and ethical teachings of these religions. Moses' multifaceted role as a leader, mediator, legislator, prophet, and spiritual guide illustrates his importance in the biblical narrative. His interactions with God and the Israelites not only shaped the history of Israel but also laid the groundwork for understanding the nature of God's covenant relationship with his people. When God spoke the 10 Commandments to the Israelites at Mount Sinai, Exodus 20, it was a defining moment in the relationship between God and his people. The commandments are often seen as the foundational moral code for living in harmony with God and one another. Here is a breakdown of the big meanings and powerful lessons drawn from the 10 Commandments. Exclusive worship of God. Commandments 1 and 2. You shall have no other gods before me. You shall not make for yourself a graven image. These commandments emphasize the importance of monotheism and fidelity to God. The Israelites were to worship God alone and not engage in idolatry. It underscores the relationship God desires with his people, a relationship based on trust and exclusivity. Lesson. This teaches us about loyalty, devotion, and the dangers of putting anything ahead of our relationship with God. Respecting God's name. Commandment 3. You shall not take the name of the Lord your God in vain. This commandment emphasizes the sacredness of God's name. It calls for reverence and respect in how God's name is used, forbidding misuse or frivolous treatment of his holy identity. Lesson. It reminds us to honor what is sacred, be it God's name or any aspect of our faith. It also warns against the misuse of speech and words. Observing the Sabbath. Commandment 4. Remember the Sabbath day, to keep it holy. This commandment calls for a day of rest and reflection, a time set aside to honor God and step away from the pressures of daily life. It was also a reminder of God's rest after creation. Lesson. The Sabbath is about balancing work and rest, reminding us of our limitations and our need to reconnect with God regularly. Honor for parents. Commandment 5. Honor your father and your mother. Respect for authority and family is essential in maintaining societal structure and continuity. This commandment places great importance on the family unit, promising long life to those who honor their parents. Lesson. It highlights the value of respect for authority and elders and recognizes the role of family in creating a stable community. Respect for life. Commandment 6. You shall not kill. This commandment protects the sanctity of life, forbidding murder and emphasizing the inherent value of each person. Lesson. It teaches us about the sacredness of life and the importance of treating all human beings with dignity and care. Faithfulness in marriage. Commandment 7. You shall not commit adultery. Faithfulness in relationships is essential for trust and stability. Adultery disrupts the covenant of marriage, which is a reflection of the covenant between God and his people. Lesson. It stresses the importance of loyalty, trust, and commitment, both in marriage and in broader relationships. Respect for property. Commandment 8. You shall not steal. This commandment ensures the protection of personal property and promotes a sense of justice and fairness in society. Lesson. It teaches us about honesty, fairness, and respect for the belongings of others. Truthfulness. Commandment 9. You shall not bear false witness against your neighbor. The commandment condemns lying, especially in legal settings, as dishonesty undermines justice and trust within the community. Lesson. This teaches the value of truth and the importance of integrity in maintaining justice in relationships. 9. Guarding against covetousness. Commandment 10. You shall not covet anything that belongs to your neighbor. Covetousness is a desire for what others have, which can lead to envy, greed, and discontent. This commandment addresses the internal motivations of the heart, cautioning against unchecked desires. Lesson: it teaches the importance of contentment, gratitude, and the dangers of letting material desires dominate one's thoughts and actions. The bigger meaning: a covenant relationship. The Ten Commandments, given as part of God's covenant with Israel, were more than just laws. They outlined how the Israelites were to live in relationship with God and with one another. These laws highlighted how deeply God cared for the moral and spiritual well-being of His people. The commandments taught Israel that love for God and love for neighbor were intertwined. Jesus' teaching in the New Testament also brings this out. When asked which commandment was the greatest, Jesus summarized the entire law: love the Lord your God with all your heart, with all your soul, and with all your mind, and love your neighbor as yourself. Matthew 22:37-39. This encapsulates the two main sections of the Ten Commandments: our duty toward God and our duty toward others. Powerful lessons from the Ten Commandments. Moral responsibility. The Ten Commandments serve as a timeless moral guide, emphasizing principles of respect, justice, and holiness. Heart and action. The commandments go beyond mere external actions and challenge individuals to examine their inner motives and desires. Community building. By fostering respect for others' rights, life, and property, they help in building a just and peaceful society. Personal and spiritual integrity. By focusing on truth, faithfulness, and the worship of God alone, they emphasize personal integrity and a deep connection with the divine. May your spiritual journey be filled with God's grace and peace. Don't forget to like, subscribe, and share this video to inspire others on their walk with the Lord.